The end of the year can be pretty stressful. And our family has certainly seen its share of this. And in my studio, the families, well, it's the same for them as well. So, how do we work around that uphill battle that it's the end of the school year or the end of the term, and we still want to keep our students engaged? Well, I'll be sharing some tips in this video on how to keep students engaged till the very last lesson while still letting you have a life outside of your teaching. Because isn't that what we all want? If we haven't met before, I'm Rosemarie Penner from the Unfinished Lesson, and I wanted all balance in juggling teaching and running a studio with family life with twins. The Unfinished Lesson started as my way of helping other independent music teachers and studio owners have balance in their life and creativity in their studio. Because guess what? You can have both. Be sure to watch to the end. I'm going to be sharing 3 resources that will help you make the last lessons engaging for everyone involved. Your students are going to appreciate this approach. Parents are going to be impressed that you're succeeding where pretty much every other teacher is failing at this point. And you're going to head into vacation feeling a lot more rested. And doesn't that sound amazing? So tip number 1, change the script. I don't know about you, but I'm not really interested in fighting a losing battle. So if something isn't working, change it. And I know that sounds a lot easier to say than to do. So don't worry, I'm going to give you a few tips here. Starting off with greet with a smile, and then make sure you end with a smile as well. So in my studio, I don't care how the lesson went. I want to make sure that I end the lesson with a smile, and I'm letting my student know that I am so glad that I got to spend time with them. Why? Well, because beginnings and ends, that's what we typically remember. And so I want to frame our lessons always that my students know, even if stuff in the middle didn't go great, I still want to spend that time with them. I still want to be able to see them the next week. It's especially important for special needs students, especially if they've had a rough day. This one is incredibly important because if they've had a rough day, they've probably had multiple teachers, multiple adults in their life say, you know what, I'm done. And then that's it. That's literally it. They're done that activity. So we want to make sure that we're being a lot different than that. And your special needs students, they're probably going to be struggling. A change in the schedule means a change in routine, right? And whenever there's a change in routine, that can be really hard for students that are special needs, neurodiverse, because all of a sudden, the things that they come to rely on each week, that's changing. So just make sure that you greet with a smile and end with a smile. Idea 2 within this category is to give more choice. Once my students are done preparing for our recital, our spring recital, I don't really see a point in me dictating what we're going to do. So, you know what? All I do is I just give my students choices. It doesn't mean I don't do any planning. I do. But I will say, you know what? Do you want to do this, 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 or this first? And depending on the student, maybe it's only 3 options or 2 options, or maybe it's just literally everything that we could do that lesson. Maybe it's 4 or 5 or even 6 options. You'll know with your student how much is too much. And so just letting them choose. And if you don't have your students choose their songs all year round, this would be a good time to start. That if it's a few weeks before the end of your term, just let them choose what they're playing. Why not? Right? They're more likely to practice. They're more likely to stay engaged simply because they made that decision. Another thing you can do is change the location. If it's possible, go outside. I remember we did creative writing in high school, and we would, when it was nice out, go outside. It was fantastic. It felt like a break from the regular routine in the best possible way. It felt a lot more relaxed. And it's not that we didn't do any creative writing, we did, but it just felt more natural to be able to write outside. When I was teaching in the classroom, I actually did the same thing with my students. If it was a super nice day, why were we staying in the classroom when all of us were probably going to be sweating, getting tired because of the heat and just staring out the window anyways? We may as well go outside and do something productive there. And I also did the same thing as a traveling piano teacher. So I would bring along chalk and ask the parents beforehand, is it okay if we draw on the driveway or the sidewalk in front of your house? And typically parents were fine with that. And we would do music theory outside. And the kids loved it. They just thought it was great. And I liked it because we were reviewing things from the year, but in a way that was fun and engaging for my students. And I wasn't fighting them staring out the window. Because of course, it doesn't matter whether it's a classroom or a studio, kids will do the same thing there. I would say also reduce time on activities. So there's going to be a certain amount of squirrel syndrome at this time of the year. Everybody is kind of getting ready for a change. Now, some people are going to look forward to that. Some people are going to dread it. But just don't wait for the attention to wane. Be proactive. Do shorter segments. So maybe this is more interleaved practice where a student was able to do larger sections that you could focus on in their music. Maybe you do a very short section and then you do something else and then you come back to it. This works out really great in terms of what we know about how brains work and how we learn. So it's a great strategy all year round, but especially at this point in time, it doesn't matter. If you only spent 2 minutes on an activity, that's fine. No worries, right? We don't need to fight a losing battle, right? We're going to change the script and we're going to make it that our student almost has no choice but to be successful and to be engaged. And lastly, on this particular tip, just embrace humor, okay? There's going to be some frayed emotions at times, depending on how the kids are sleeping. The light might be staying up later, or the light might be staying up later. The light might stay bright longer into the evening. So sleep might not be as great as it was just a few months ago. And so just keep that in mind, that you don't want to add to the situation, just use humor. All right, so tip number 2, make sure that you reduce expectations, not standards. So you can still have studio-wide events and you can still have standards, but you want to change the expectations. So just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, if we go off of Google's definitions, a standard is a level of quality or attainment, and an expectation is a belief that someone will or should achieve something. And so there's a little bit of a difference here, right? The standard is, this is the minimum, and then the expectation is that they're going to either reach that minimum or they're going to be at a higher level than that. In education, these terms are used slightly differently. And so I just want to also address that we don't want to have an unconscious bias towards a student, not just at this point in the year, but at any point in the year. So what it means is that we don't want to assume that a student can't do something just because X, Y, Z. So I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when I was doing a practicum at an art school, the teacher next door to mine, to the classroom I was working in, he taught the lower level English classes. Now you might think, okay, that's fine. He probably did simpler literature. No, he didn't. He did Shakespeare with his students. I remember going to see one of the Lord of the Rings movies with his class because they had read it in the classroom. His thinking was that we shouldn't give students boring stuff, right? Students are capable of so much if we have the right supports in place. So for instance, Lord of the Rings, his students were not expected to read that on their own. They actually read that as a class. He read it out loud to them. And each class, they also then kind of did a synopsis of what just happened. They worked through it together. Notice that he didn't take what the students were doing and assume that they couldn't reach a Lord of the Rings level, whatever that may be, but he put supports in place to make it happen. So we want to make sure we're doing that all year, right? At the end of the year, if your students are tired and there's a lot of things going on, then what we need to do is figure out, what does that look like at this time of the year? So I'm going to give you a few examples. So example 1, repertoire. So the minimum standard could be that a student will be able to play with correct notes, rhythm, articulation, and dynamics for a song to be considered mastered. That might be your minimum, okay? You want to make sure that all of those things have happened. Not a problem. The expectation at this point in the year, when it's just those last few lessons, maybe it's the last month before lessons, or even just the last like two lessons, they're going to reach that standard, but with a lower level of repertoire that reviews concepts from the course of the year. So notice, you're not just giving them fluff. There's a reason why they're doing that repertoire. It reviews things that they have learned over the course of the year, but it's at a lower level so that it's easier for them to reach that standard. So example 2 is going to be behavior. So the minimum standard is that your student will pay attention and actively engage in each activity. The expectation is going to be that you're going to have shorter activities that are set up to be more engaging. So we're kind of setting it up that they're automatically going to be more engaged, and have lots of check-ins to ensure that attention is held. And so that comes in when I was talking about maybe just reducing the length of the activities or the time that you spend on things. Same standard from the year, but the approach and the expectations, at least in terms of level, are different. So later on at the end of this video, I will have a couple activity ideas that will help you do this, ones that my students find really engaging. And yeah, we can kind of move through pretty fast with the activities, or at least the different aspects of it. So tip number 3, make activities automatically more engaging. Now, you'll notice I've mentioned this one a few times already, but I'm going to go into more detail now. So rather than put this on your students that they have to keep themselves engaged in lesson, you're putting it on yourself, okay? Basically, you want to make sure that it's impossible to not be engaged. So for instance, group lessons is a fantastic option. One, nobody wants to seem like they're not participating in the group, whether that's in person or online. And when activities include every member of the group, then it's more engaging. It's harder for them to just coast by when you're constantly checking in and, well, what do you think? And what do you think? And what's your answer? You know, whatever it might be. Or if they're working as teams, then also they're not wanting to let down their teammates. Digital escape rooms is one that we love working on in group lessons, and we actually do it as a full group. So what happens is, for example, when there's multiple choice, I'll read out what those are, and I'll go 1, 2, 3, or 4. And my students can just hold up on the screen. They hold up what finger numbers they're choosing. And then I go off of whatever the most number of answers was, or like whatever answer got the highest number of votes. And if it was wrong, then you know what, we go back and we check it. If it's that I'm typing in an answer, for example, like, what did you think of this song? Why, or, you know, did you like this song? Why or why not, maybe, or something along those lines, or what elements did the composer use for, you know, X, Y, Z. Then all of a sudden, what I'll do is I will quickly check in with the students, and they give me one sentence to answer it, and I type in all of them. They see this on the screen that I'm typing in their answers. So that's a way of keeping it very engaging during the group lesson. Very short snippets, but they always are answering. They're always being involved. A second option that is automatically engaging are student-led conferences. So this is a favorite, and not just for my students and the parents, though they really love these, I happen to love them from an admin side. There's almost no planning on my part, because really what I'm doing is I'm just providing support at that point, but it's incredibly engaging for both students and parents. And that's what we want. So it should be done during lesson time, not just the student-led conference, but all of the planning. This is not something we want to put on our students, and it means that we can really guide the process, and we can make it quick in some areas, and we can pull back and spend a little bit more time on other areas. Imagine just not really having to plan a whole lot for the last 3 to 5 weeks of lessons in the term. That's what it's like for me. It doesn't mean I'm not checking on student progress. It doesn't mean I'm not pulling any resources. I am, but my planning is a lot less because we're spending part of lesson time getting ready for this. If you're wanting to find out how these are especially useful in the music studio, just make sure you check out the video. So as promised, here are 3 resources that will help you take the tips from this video and keep your students engaged right to the very end of your term, to that last lesson. And the first one is keeping students engaged to the last lesson. This is the companion article to this video. And while it does go through some of the same tips, it also includes signs that your students, their families, or you are burnt out. And this is an important one, because if any of those groups are feeling burnt out, then you need to change your approach, right? Change the script. That's the one you're going to start off with. There's no point in everybody being stressed out or burnt out. And so just making some tweaks, making some changes will make a world of difference. Now, if you're wanting to save some admin time in your planning, just feel free to check out some of the resources on my site. So one of the ones I mentioned was digital escape rooms. Again, massive hit in my studio, and not just with the younger students, but actually with my older students as well. There's lots of different topics, and after you have made sure to download or make the copy into your Google Drive, there is almost no admin time. I made sure to set them up so that you don't have a bunch of marking. The second option is student-led conferences, as I had mentioned. So I have some student-led conference planning worksheets. Now, these are the exact questions, the exact format that I used with my students, and it worked as a planning worksheet, but it also worked as their lesson plan when they were doing the conferences with their parent. And so it's set up for online, but also in-person teachers. So if you're thinking, yeah, I don't really want to do anything techie, not a problem. There's a PDF version there for you. So you're not going to want to miss out on the series this month. We're going to be covering all sorts of things related to end of term. So be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons so that you don't miss out.